Hi, this is Ed Koehler with Extreme Networks, and I'm very pleased to be your host for this session, kicking off a series of videos that I'll be doing throughout the year to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Fabric Connect. Wow, 10 years. It's really hard to believe. Um, and it's such a momentous occasion, it's very tempting to kind of look back into the past and over the history and maybe take a walk down memory lane. And perhaps we'll do that for one of the videos in the upcoming year, but not for the kickoff. For the kickoff, we're going to talk about the future. And the title of this video is Effortless Networking for the Infinite Enterprise, Cloud-Enabled Automation. We're going to talk about the latest innovations that we're delivering to you based on Fabric Connect as a protocol architecture. And in order to do that, we're going to focus on cloud-managed deployments enabled by zero-touch automation. And when I say zero-touch, I mean zero touch. And you'll see that throughout the course of the video that you will see today. Let's put some definitions of what we're talking about. We at Extreme believe that networks are far too complex to deploy and manage throughout the day-to-day business. It's becoming increasingly stressful on IT staff. Now, we've known for quite some time the values and benefits that Fabric Connect can bring to the table. And customers have told us that they've seen up to 70% OpEx improvement to their IT service models. But we're not stopping there. We're talking about automation 90% of today's edge provisioning tasks as well. And that focuses on automated onboarding of network elements, automated fabric deployment, automated service provisioning, and automated policy management. So that's really where we're going to focus today. But before we do that, let's talk about automation, because there are multiple types. On the right-hand side, we see what people think about when you mention automation. We think about some network operator that's actually writing up config scripts, usually in Python, but other languages are used, and those configs are basically communicated to the switches through APIs. And yes, this is automation, and it gives the benefit of a write once, run many type of model. But nonetheless, the network operator is responsible for the automation, and it relies on the expertise of the network operator. And there are some special skills that you need to master in order to really utilize this form of automation effectively. On the left-hand side of the slide, we see implicit automation, and this is really where we are going to focus on in today's video. And this is where the network itself takes care of the automation tasks. As a result, there's no scripting necessary, just a few configurations. The network protocols themselves are used for the automation, and that's really where we're going to focus today. And we feel it's a great, fantastic innovation. And that innovation is really focused around Autosense Ports. Basically, what we've done is we've given a lot of intelligence to our edge switch ports in the Autosense mode. And they're able to detect what type of device they're communicating to. In the highest case example, we see a VSP peer detected, and as a result, we would set up an NNI link with that fabric neighbor. We can see if we detect an FA peer, then we would use fabric attach protocol in order to establish that link. We also see the ability to support IP phones, and then of course radius configured host attachment. Now all of, and let us not forget onboarding and guest. Now all of these modes are basically available in this one Autosense option, and this is really the key innovation that we're going to talk about today, because it not only allows you zero-touch onboarding of network elements, it provides the ability for a zero-touch end-to-end fabric. And I'm not kidding when I say that. You will see it with your own eyes. Now, in order to demonstrate that, we need a lab. Now, I want to emphasize this is not a live lab. This is a lab that we have in Reading, UK. And I'm going to use some video clips that were created by a very good friend and colleague of mine by the name of Ludo Stevens. And what we'll do is we'll talk about the deployment and we'll talk about some of the initial setups in the first clip. Now, all of the switches that we see in this view are basically defaults. So all of the VSPs, the XOS, the ERSs, everything is default. The only thing that we've configured thus far is this VSP 7200. That's really where we're going to focus on right now, because we have to establish a seed in order to actually do the zero-touch fabric. And the 7200 provides that. Now, beyond the basic SPBM configuration, which you all know and love, we are actually going to show you the several things. They're not a large number, actually just a few changes that we have to make to the network element in order to make it a seed for the zero-touch fabric deployment. Now, a couple things I want you to note are RNNIs, which are established connectivity to the rest of the fabric. And then also note that we have port 16 here on the bottom that attaches to the management segment, and that management segment contains our DHCP server and also our DNS. It also provides XMC as well as XIQ. So this we'll refer to as the management segment. So what we'll do now is we will go in and take a look at some of the extra settings that we had to do into the VSP 7200 in order to get it to act as a seed for the rest of the network deployment. And you'll find that we don't have to touch any of the other switches at all. So this is a little bit more detail here. What we're going to talk about is on the uplink port, which you will recall was 16. We will set up a particular VLAN environment, and it's what we call a private VLAN E-tree, and that will provide the onboarding. And you'll see this rose-colored dotted arrow throughout the rest of the video that will indicate this onboarding VLAN that is occurring. And this is really what gives us the ability to run Autosense and do the dynamic onboarding into the environment. So with that, what we'll do is we'll go in and look at the 7200 in a little bit more detail. So coming over to our clip, we'll go in and basically show our VLANs within the switch. And there we can see that we have our onboarding VLAN that we've established. We can also see that its type is private, in addition to the SPBM VLANs that we have. We can also see that that private VLAN is established to an onboarding ISID of the same value. By default, it's normally the high order ISID of 15,999,999, but here it's the same value as the VLAN itself. Now, one thing we want to note is that normally the mode would be isolated. You can see that here at the seed, we've taken and created the PVLAN type on port 16. This is leading to the management segment, and there we've set it up to be promiscuous. This is the only switch where you have to do that. The next thing we had to do was go in and set up and enable our nickname server. And then also we set up a nickname range that will be provisioned as the fabric nodes on board. And that's pretty much it. I mean, really not a lot of configuration detail beyond what you have to do in a normal SPBM config. Basically, we're setting up the onboarding VLAN, setting the hub, which is the seed, to promiscuous, and then beyond that, we're going in and setting up our nickname server and the nickname range. That's pretty much it in summary. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move to the opposite end of the diagram, and we're going to have switch 5520-24W. This is the switch that we're going to look at to get a perspective of how the rest of the fabric builds out. So this is really what we're going to do at this point. Now, keep in mind that we're looking at the perspective of the build out from the node 5520-24W. And do take note of the port establishments. I do note that we have a wireless access point here on 16. We also have a phone plugged in on 17. we can also see that we have several network-to-network interfaces that are established to other nodes, and we should see those populate as we move forward. So the first thing we're going to look at is the dynamic establishment of the fabric nodes themselves. And here we see the creation of the ISIS network-to-network interface, then the actual onboarding VLAN to onboard the actual fabric node into the actual management segment. Then we're going to see a second iteration of automation, because recall that we had ERS and XOS switches at the edge as well. So we will see the fabric attached dialog, establish connectivity, and then the onboarding VLAN will appropriately onboard those devices as well. Keep in mind that we will touch nothing in order to make this happen. This is why we refer to this as true zero-touch innovation. So here we are. We can see that we're in our XMC screen. You can also see that we have a series of nodes that are established or not established within the actual environment itself. Basically, the discovered view is empty. Remember that we still have that 7200 that we configured and set up that would be in the Devices tab. Now, I want to emphasize that this discovered pane really shows the devices as they're discovered by the zero-touch fabric automation. And then as they are provisioned and onboarded, they will be transferred over to the Devices tab. So let's take a look at this. What we're going to do is go into the console of the actual 5520 switch. And here we're going to look at the node come online. See our networking services, security, now you can see our links are coming up. We're starting to get adjacencies detected, establishing into the fabric. Note that we have a fabric attached switch UNI. Notice that that's on port 16. We'll come back to that later. Note that our SPVM nickname is dynamically assigned to the nickname server, and that allows us to run multicast, which allows us to run DHCP. We get our access to our IP address and our DNS server addresses, as well as our DNS name. Now notice that as a result of that, we have a zero-touch provisioning process started. Our Discovered tab is now populated. In one note about this is a dynamic population. You'll see nodes populate on, populate off. You'll see the first thing that we're talking about is the site path. This is where the actual device will show up in XMC. Notice how one switch just disappeared. And you'll notice that these devices are set up in configuration staged for device. As the provisioning happens and occurs, you will notice that this screen will depopulate and those devices will be shown in the Devices tab to the left-hand side. Note that our ERS has now come online. That's through Fabric Attach. And then we also have our Summit series come online through Fabric Attach as well. And now the discovered view is empty. We'll go over to the Devices tab, and we can see that we have all of our devices populated. Go into our topology map and make some adjustments so it more reflects the diagram that we've been working off of. And there we have our fabric deployment. It's that easy. Really, the only thing that we had to do was the initial setup on the 7200 to get to this point in the deployment. So now let's go back to our diagram, and here we're going to still focus on the 5520-24W. Take note of the ports that the wireless AP in the phone is connected to, 17 and 16 respectively. We're going to actually focus on what's going on at the network edge at this point. So what we're going to talk about is Fabric Attach for the wireless AP. And we're going to show how it has established itself through the onboarding VLAN and has received its fabric attach assignments effectively. And this will call back to the assignments that we saw in the earlier clip. And then the second example that we'll see is the establishment of an IP phone, the ability to use the onboarding VLAN in order to have its voice assignments occur. So now here we are. Again, keep note, we're still in the 5520 here, and we're going to come over and run the clip again, and this time we'll look at the actual UNI ports, 1.6 and 1.7, but we'll also take a cursory view of the NNIs as well. So we can see that we have our AP established to port 1.6. We can see that on port 1.7 we have our IP phone. And then the other three ports, we can see our VSP switches, which we suspect are NNI neighbors, and we can validate that by looking at the interface detail config. And we can show that indeed, when we look at the Autosense state, that those three ports are indeed network-to-network interfaces. And the Autosense state for port 1.7 is voice, and for 1.6, it's fabric attached wireless access point. We look at the details of the adjacencies. We can validate indeed that those are the neighbor switches that we have on our diagram. Now we look at fabric attach, and here we can see that on port 1.6 we have a wireless access point, and it has successful authentication. Notice that we are running fabric attach message authentication, and that is enabled. Now if we go in and actually look at the services that are deployed through fabric attach, we can see that we have three VLANs, three ISIDs. Those were the three that were established earlier in the earlier clip. If we go in and show details on port 6, you'll see those ISIDs, but you'll also see the onboarding VLAN is still there. We need that for attachment to the management segment for ongoing services. But you can see that the other three ISIDs are there and established through the fabric attached dialog to give basic end user access to the network. Now we'll go in and take a look at our voice services configuration. We'll just do that by show Autosense. You can see that in our config, we are basically anything that's identified as an IP phone is going to be set in VLAN 200, ISID 2800, 200. And we can validate that by looking at the configuration that has occurred on port 1.7. Again, I want to note that the onboarding VLAN is still there. And the reason why that's there is because you may have a PC attached to the IP phone, and it will need to authenticate through EAP into the network environment. But you can see that our voice ISID has been established to the IP phone, and that is tagged, and then the onboarding VLAN remains untagged and then allows for PCs to establish into the network through the IP phone. So that is that use case example. Now, what we're going to do is the final example. We're going to talk about using it for an Ethernet port in the Autosense state there. Here we have a user PC that establishes, connects to the network through the onboarding VLAN, registers into the management segment and receives radius services, and at that point a policy is established for connectivity to the user into the fabric itself. So in this case, we are going to look at 5520 48T. That's the switch that was right below the 24W. And the reason why we're doing that is because that is where the switch is connected to. Note also that we have our ISIS adjacencies on port 1 and port 2 on the 5520 48T. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go in and look at our EAP environment. multi-host. Keep in mind that we're configured for that. We'll get to that later. We can see port 1.5, and we do indeed have the PC established. We can see that the ISID has been established, and there is no value for the VLAN, which means it's untagged. We can also see that the ISID source is radius. If we go and look at the ISIDs on port 1.5, we can see that we have our service ISID, which has been established through EAP. And then we also have our onboarding VLAN, which is still there available on the port because remember, this is a multi-host deployment. So we do have to have that there in case other PCs establish connectivity. So that brings us to the end of the video. And I guess at this point, what we'll do is summarize what we've seen. We've seen all of the automation elements. We've seen zero-touch fabric deployment. We've seen auto onboarding segments and the use of this onboarding segment. Auto onboarding to XMC, XIQ. We've seen example for dynamic policies through EAP, POL, NEAP with user-based authentication, dynamic VLAN and ISID policy establishment. We've seen several examples of auto fabric attach, and we've shown an IP phone example where we've done integration in that area. The only thing that we did not show is a fabric attached zero-touch client like from a third-party camera, such as from our partners at Access and others who deploy that technology. But as you could imagine, it's really just a small stretch from what we saw with the various fabric attach examples in this video. So I want to thank you for your time here today. Again, it's great to be here to kick off the 10th year anniversary. And this shows that we've had 10 years of fabric innovation. This shows the latest innovations that we're delivering to you, the customer. And what we're inviting you to do is continue and advance with us. Thanks very much for your time. Ed Koehler with Extreme, signing out.